So, dear learners, now we are going to discuss the other aspects of the rights of sexual minorities. We were discussing the uh, the contemporary discourse on human rights, and we discussed first of all terrorism, counter-terrorism, and human rights. Then we took up the issue of rights of sexual minorities, and we found that what kind of heated debate on the rights and the plight of the sexual minorities is there. And we also identified how the cultural values, religious norms, and societal milieux, they are becoming a roadblock in the way of recognition of the rights of sexual minorities. Uh, and we also discussed that even the United Nations does not have a working definition on the sexual minorities. And we discussed that United Nations has right from the very beginning tried to develop consensus on the catalog of rights. So these days you'll find there is a lot of debate, discussion, churning, deliberations upon the plight of the sexual minorities or the challenges and the problem they are facing in the different countries. And that's why the United Nations has also paid attention. And you'll find that in the study conducted by the United Nations, it was acknowledged that the people from these kind of inclination means same-sex relations, they are prone to many kind of violations of human rights that we discussed. Then we also had identified in our previous lecture about the three categories of the countries. There was one category where you see that these inclinations, that is means LGBTQ plus individuals and their inclinations, they are criminalized. The second category was the countries where these inclinations have got legitimacy and they have been legalized, and their rights have been recognized. And other than these two categories, we have also identified the third category of the countries where you'll find these countries have neither legalized nor criminalized. So these people are there, but their position is hanging, and it all depends upon what kind of attitude and acceptability the society is giving to them. So in those countries, you will find that advocacy groups are saying that the people are divided into two. There is one group, of course, quoting or citing the religious norms, traditions, and all. They declare it as a sin, and that's why they advocate that there should be criminalization of these sexual orientations. On the other hand, you will find that the other advocacy groups will be saying that uh, this inclination is also natural and it should be given due recognition by the law of the land. So ultimately, so this binary is created, and you'll find a lot of heated debate on this issue. uh, we discussed the landscape, the international landscape surrounding LGBTQ rights, that paints a varied picture. So after this, we are going to further discuss this issue. At the other end, there are countries who do not criminalize but not legalizing it, either including China and Russia. You see, so these are the countries. They have they are countries who do not criminalize but not legalizing it. So, for example, China and Russia. Then we have, while individuals may not face criminal charges for engaging in same-sex sexual activity, they still may experience discrimination and lack of legal protections. So in these countries, what is their challenge? That these people, they may not be punished by the law of the land for same-sex relations or sexual activity, but at the same time, they are not protected by the law of the land. So legal framework for the protection of their right is not available like China and Russia. The lack of legal recognition can also impact access to healthcare, employment, and other basic rights for LGBTQ plus individuals in these countries, creating a gray area for LGBTQ individuals in terms of their rights and protections. So what is being explained here, that when the legal framework or the legal recognition is not there by the state or by the law of the land, so these are the various challenges. For example, access to healthcare facilities, employment, and other basic rights for LGBTQ individuals in these countries is creating a gray area, and where the LGBTQ people, they don't find a space for all these things. Similarly, there are those nations decriminalizing and legalizing these inclinations. These countries, such as Canada and parts of Europe, have implemented laws to protect LGBTQ plus individuals from discrimination and provide legal recognition for their relationships. So, Canada is one of them, and then other some European countries, they have already provided legal protection to them. This legal framework allows for greater access to healthcare, employment opportunities, and other rights for LGBTQ plus individuals in these nations. So, you know, the if you see the growth or the how this debate has passed different stages. For example, the first of all, it all was started by the transgender people. That the male and female you will find in the buses or at the public places, the seats were reserved either for male and female. Then the question arises, what about the transgender who consider themselves neither male nor female? So does it mean that we should not recognize, because since they are a microscopic minority, so that is why does it mean that we should not recognize them as transgender? So it all started from there, and then other groups started coming together, and it becomes LGBTQ plus plus. So this is also we should keep in mind. Now you see the interesting debate is the battleground of beliefs, nature versus nurture. Fueling the debate on LGBTQ plus rights are contrasting theories about the origins of sexual orientation and gender identity. For example, the nature argument attributes these characteristics to innate biological or genetic factors, while the nurture perspective emphasizes the role of social and cultural influences. So, the first thing, whether, the first question arises whether the same sex inclination is natural or not. In most of the cases, you will find the societies who are hostile to these things, they will say it is not natural, it is unnatural, and there are many arguments in its favor. For example, they say, arguments are that if the relationship between male and female is maintained, then the family will develop. The babies will be there. But if the same sex relations are there, it is, going to make society barren. And after some time, there will be the end of the humanity. This kind of arguments also you'll find. This debate often shapes legal and political decisions, with some arguing that immutable characteristics deserve greater protection. So, these inclinations for many people are also sexual perversion or, sin or social perversion. So, that is why they say that it should not be accepted. The complexities of the nature versus nurture debate often get entangled with the cultural relativism versus universalism argument when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights. So, that is again, there may be cultures who may be ready to accept the individual inclinations, but there are cultures who see that it is against the religious values, social values, cultural values, and that is why they will be hostile to it. So that is why this argument uh, ultimately leads to the great debate in human rights, that is universalism versus cultural relativism. So that's why the cultures who are ready to welcome these inclinations, they have already legalized, and the cultures who are hostile to it, they have not legalized, rather they have criminalized. Cultural relativists argue that social norms and values should dictate the treatment of LGBTQ plus individuals, suggesting that rights and freedoms should not be imposed universally but respected within each cultural context. You know, that is one thing. So that is why LGBTQ plus rights cannot be universal rights according to them. Why? Because they argue that social norms and values should dictate the treatment of LGBTQ individuals. So it should not be superimposed by either by a body like the United Nations or any regional organization. They say that the cultural norms should be taken into account. Then only you can develop a debate on this. And they suggest that rights and freedom should not be imposed universally but respected within each cultural context. So, if there are certain cultures, if they have criminalized it and they are very hostile to LGBTQ plus inclination, they say that this is not a universal right, and that is why the organizations or the advocacy groups from outside, who are not from their culture, they cannot understand the challenges of imposing these kind of rights and this kind of discourse. So that is why they are, opposed to it. This perspective can be used to justify discriminatory practices against LGBTQ plus communities based on prevailing cultural beliefs, often leading to harmful consequences. So, that parading them nude in public, or some kind of other societal violence or stigmatization, humiliation, all these things are very common things attached with this group in the societies who are not ready to accept it. So, when the societies are not accepting it, it justify discriminatory practices against LGBTQ communities. On the other side, universalists advocate for a set of fundamental human rights applicable to all individuals, regardless of their cultural background. So, they will say that, there are a set of human rights that are universal in nature, and under this universal human rights, these groups are trying to find a place, means LGBTQ groups, they are trying to find a place under what is called the universal human rights. And they say that the list of universal human rights should also include the rights of these people to be recognized as legitimate inclinations. They argue that inherent characteristics like sexual orientation and gender identity deserve universal protection, transcending cultural norms. And that's why it is problematic. Because national governments are quite apprehensive in many countries. They are not ready to accept it. They say that if you are having a universal claim to these rights, we are going to show all kind of reservation to it. Why? Because according to them, the society is not ready to accept. So, when the society or the country or the cultural and the social norms are hostile to them, they are not going to accept the demand or the argument given by the universalist. This approach emphasizes the inherent dignity and equality of all people, seeking to dismantle discriminatory practices rooted in cultural interpretations. Now, you see this interesting question that according to universalists, that cultural relativism becomes a shield for many countries or cultures to justify discriminatory practices. And that's why they say that universal human rights, they must be recognized. Otherwise, in the name of cultural norms and traditions, what will happen? Discriminatory practices will continue in those societies. So, in the light of this, they say that the discriminatory treatment given to the LGBTQ plus individuals is also a discriminatory practice, and that is why it cannot be justified on the cultural interpretations, because they are also human beings. By virtue of human being, they have a legitimate claim to certain inalienable rights, and that cannot be denied to them. However, both sides have their own limitations that we can understand. The nature argument, while highlighting potential biological underpinnings, risk oversimplifying the complex interplay of genetics, environment, and individual experiences. Additionally, focusing solely on universal rights can lead to an imposition of Western values onto diverse cultures, overlooking genuine cultural differences and concerns. Now we are going to discuss the global tapestry, UN regional actors, and the quest for universal recognition. So, what is there in this? That while there is no single unifying traditional international treaty specifically addressing LGBTQ plus rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights establishes the foundation for equality and non discrimination, based on any status, including sexual orientation and gender identity. If you see the language of the UDHR and other human rights instruments that have been developed under the aegis of the United Nations, you will find that the language is that there should not be any discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, creed, sex, place of birth. So the sex cannot be made the ground of gender discrimination. Uh, so you will find earlier, the sex was considered as discrimination against women. Discrimination based on sex was considered as gender discrimination against women. But now you see the term sex is being expanded to include the LGBTQ plus. And the first part of human rights activism, you will find that struggled for the recognition of the rights of women, equal rights of women. Now you will find that the latest debate, the contemporary debate, contemporary discourse is trying to include this LGBTQ under this, the non-discrimination clause that is the integral component of all the human rights treaties, whether regional or international. So, they are trying to expand the scope of the word sex or gender to include all these people. The regional organizations like the European Union and the Inter American Commission on Human Rights play crucial roles in advocating for LGBTQ plus rights through resolutions and pronouncements. So, they have made some uh, progress in this direction for the recognition of the rights of LGBTQ, but you cannot say that they have accepted all the countries under these Inter-American Commission or European Union. They have accepted the rights of LGBTQ plus. However, the lack of a unified global stance hinders progress, highlighting the need for continued dialogue and coordinated action. LGBTQ rights have turned into a significant part or the headliner of the human rights agenda at the United Nations after having been rejected or ignored for numerous years. So that's why we have included it under the contemporary discourse on human rights. So of late, you will find there is a lot of focus on this particular issue, especially the challenges and the issues faced by the LGBTQ. So that's why you see the United Nations had tried to address the issues of these people, of course, but the United Nations has to see that an international consensus is developed, and it is very hard to develop in near future, keeping in view the approaches and the divergent approaches basically taken by the different countries of the world. This latest importance has proven to be made explicit via an international multimedia campaign, Free and Equal, started by the United Nations in 2013, aimed at promoting equal rights and fair treatment of LGBTQ people, underlining the repercussions of discrimination and abuse towards LGBT peoples and communities. So you see now the United Nations is trying to address the challenges and the problems faced by this microscopic minority. And that's why you will find that the UN campaign, I have been telling you right from the very beginning that the human rights have been evolving. So you'll find that there was a time when women were not considered fit for voting, and that's why the rights were not given to them. Later on, you'll find that the universal adult suffrage was recognized. Similarly, you'll find when the women got their due, now these people are coming, into public space to demand the recognition of their rights. So the transgender or other people like LGBTQ, and you'll find that they are getting recognition by the United Nations. So it means that the advocacy groups, they have been able to sensitize the policymakers and especially the people those who matter, uh, those who are sitting in the United Nations or at other places, to recognize their plight and also to advocate for the recognition of their rights. The UN Human Rights Council in 2016 has adopted a resolution to create an independent expert for protection against the abuse and discrimination based on the sexual orientation and gender identity. It was created in 2016 again, and this becomes an important issue. So you see that how the discourse on the rights of sexual minorities is evolving, and what kind of rights are being recognized, what kind of work United Nations is doing. The role is mandated as a UN particular procedure, empowering the office holder to investigate the matters related to the LGBTQ plus population. So now you see that the what are the challenges, what are the problems, what are the difficulties faced by the LGBTQ population or the individuals, so that is to be, first of all, it is to be documented. So that is why this role has been assigned to a group. The creation of independent SOG expert is possibly the peak in organizational measures for LGBTQ individuals at the United Nations today. So you see that this is what the journey you see that first of all the male female binary, or the so the heterosexual relations being recognized by the society and other orientations being criminalized. And now where is the journey? You see that it all is started that it should be decriminalized, and from here the United Nations is moving towards appointing this a special group to study the plight, the challenges that this the group of sexual minorities they face. So that is why this is how the debate is evolving. This is how the sexual minorities are getting recognition, and their plight, their sufferings are being understood by the international organization. Now, after highlighting the work of the United Nations, we are going to take up regional organizations, champions of LGBTQ plus rights. So basically, we discussed that it is not only international organization like United Nations which has played an important role in universalizing the concept of human rights, but you will find influenced by the United Nations and the UDHR and other international instruments of human rights, the regional organizations have also come into existence, and these regional organizations are playing crucial role in not only universalizing the human rights but also making it a very effective kind of thing, and that is why the effective implementation of human rights has been made possible because of the presence of these strong regional organizations. So, while the international landscape lacks a unifying treaty specifically for LGBTQ plus rights, regional organizations play a crucial role in promoting and protecting these rights through resolutions, for example, pronouncements, and legal framework. So, we are going to give some example from the regional organizations. We have already studied three regional organizations. In the previous lectures, we have discussed in detail about the American Convention, about the African Charter, about the European Convention on Human Rights. So, now we are going to take up these organizations, what kind of role they are playing in promoting and protecting the rights of LGBTQ plus or LGBT or sexual minorities. So, first of all, we are going to take Europe. So, European Court of Human Rights. As you know, that is one of the most effective mechanisms of enforcing human rights. So, the European Court of Human Rights has issued several landmark judgments. It has ruled, in many judgments affirming the right to private life and family for same-sex couples, paving the way for marriage equality in several European countries. So, it is because of the European Court of Human Rights judgment and ruling that you will find it has paved the way for marriage equality in several European countries. In 2021, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Hungary's ban on legal gender recognition for transgender individuals violated their right to respect for private life. You see that it was the landmark ruling of the European Court of Human Rights in which it said that Hungary's ban on legal gender recognition for transgender individuals violated their right to respect for private life. Now, after European Union, we are coming to Americas. Inter-American Court of Human Rights, again another important human rights mechanism to implement human rights. So in 2017 issued the advisory opinion recognizing the rights of same-sex couples to marry and access related rights like adoption and assisted reproduction. You see, we have been discussing that how the rights are evolving. First of all, these groups, they wanted, means the LGBTQ or the sexual minority, they demanded that these inclinations should be decriminalized, and they were quite successful in getting this demand accepted by few countries. So they were decriminalized. The second stage came when they said that not only there should be decriminalization, but they wanted that there should be legalization or legitimization of the inclination of the sexual minorities. And they were successful, again, in some countries in getting legal status. The third is, of course, uh, there are countries who are still criminalizing it. But here you'll find what is happening in the America, that in 2017, what are the issues? For example, that same-sex couples to marry, that should be recognized. Uh, so there are lesbian marriages, gay marriages, for example. And again, access related rights like adoption and assisted reproduction. you know because of the technological advancement, now it is possible. So that is why they wanted the right to get access to assisted reproduction, by the taking the help of technology and all. So this is the space where they are trying to find some kind of recognition. And you'll find, because of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights ruling, they have got this opinion has influenced legislative advancement in several Latin American countries. So, because of this Inter-American Court of Human Rights ruling, what has happened that in several Latin American countries, there are some legislative advancement in the direction of the recognition of the rights of sexual minorities. In 2018, it ruled, it means the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, it ruled that Costa Rica's ban on same-sex marriage was discriminatory and ordered the country to legalize it. You see that this was a judgment issued by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, that Costa Rica had put a ban on same-sex marriage, and the this Inter-American Court of Human Rights declared it illegal and discriminatory and ordered that it should be recognized. So the Costa Rica government was asked to recognize and legalize it. Now, Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, it regularly issues country reports highlighting discriminatory practices against LGBTQ plus individuals and urging states to enact legal protections. So, of course, it cannot give ruling, but by this way, it is trying to sensitize countries and highlighting the plight of the LGBTQ plus people, and trying to influence the decision makers in these countries to be sympathetic to the rights and the challenges that the LGBTQ people are facing, so that should be understood and their rights should be recognized. It also granted precautionary measures to LGBTQ activists facing threats and violence. So, there are countries, their cultural norms are different, so that is why they are not ready to accept it. So that's why there are many people who may not be from this community, that is LGBTQ plus community, but they sympathize with the community, and that's why they have been advocating. So these human rights activists were facing threats and violence because society was not going to accept this inclination. So it also granted precautionary measures to LGBTQ plus activists facing threats and violence. Now we are coming to Africa. We have been talking about the Africa, that it cherishes the values that are there. African values are emphasized in its resolutions, and you'll find in the charter also. So African Commission on Human and People's Rights, ACHPR, that in short, adopted the resolution 275 in 2014, condemning violence and discrimination against people based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So, this resolution itself is keeping in view the value system in Africa and the custom and tradition that are cherished by the people. So, itself is something remarkable. So, you'll find it adopted the resolution 275 in 2014, condemning violence and discrimination against people based on sexual orientation and gender identity. After that, it also established an independent expert on the rights of people with albinism who works with broader LGBTQ issues. Now, after this, we are going to highlight challenges and limitations. What are the challenges? What are the limitations? While these organizations play a significant role, their effectiveness varies depending on regional dynamics and political will. For example, African countries are more diverse in their approaches to LGBTQ plus rights, with some adopting progressive stances while other maintaining discriminatory laws. So, that is a fact. You will find that uh, different countries have diverse perspective towards it. Additionally, enforcement of regional pronouncements can be inconsistent, highlighting the need for a stronger national level action. So, ultimately, we have been discussing that human rights are to be implemented by the states, because even the regional organizations or the international organizations like the United Nations, they work in a system that is called interstate framework. And after all, the member states are responsible for making corresponding laws, keeping in view the regional or international charter and declarations and the conventions, and also enforcing those laws. So that's why it all depends upon the national culture, it all depends upon the political will that is being shown by the countries. Now, looking forward, regional organizations continue to be instrumental in advancing LGBTQ plus rights. Recent examples include ECHR in 2003 ruled that Poland's ban on LGBTQ events violated the right to freedom of assembly. That then again you'll find ISEHR in 2023 called on Guatemala to investigate the murder of a transgender woman and adopt measures to protect LGBTQ individuals. Now, after this, we have to discuss the Indian landscape, navigating progress and roadblocks. You see, India is also a country that cherishes its civilizational values, cultural norms, and traditions. And there is a lot of debate on, in the post globalization phase, that is India facing what is called cultural invasion. So, the globalization has led to one thing, that is, it is not only the globalization of economy, but you will also find globalization of culture as well as globalization of challenges and problems. So that is, what kind of discourse we have in our country that we are going to explore in our next lecture. So with this, I am trying to wind up today. I think, the lecture that we have started, that who are the people who can be considered as sexual minorities, uh, or who are the people who can be called LGBTQ plus plus, whether they are recognized in the international law or not, what is the, what are the challenges, what are the problems that they face. We also try to strike a balance between the cultural claims and the claims of the universalist, and we also try to understand that why there are many cultures that are not very much positive towards these people, whereas there are some cultures who are very hostile to these kind of inclinations. And the debate whether what kind of uh, sexual orientation is natural and what kind of sexual orientation is nurtured, all these we discussed. And then we discussed about the regional mechanism, how the different, the three different regional conventions or the instruments of human rights have tried to take up this issue. And we find that in the contemporary discourse on human rights, the rights of LGBTQ or the sexual minorities has become an important issue. We have discussed all the international aspects. In the next lecture, when we are coming, we will discuss the rights of this LGBTQ plus plus in our own country. What is happening in India, what kind of attitude has been adopted by the judiciary, what kind of societal acceptability is there. All these things we are going to take up in our next lecture. Thank you very much.